Hello folks and welcome back to Ruthless Metal. In today's video we're going to continue to list some thrash metal albums. And we've come to 1992, and during this year thrash metal was on its last breath. And this led to some bands going in a more mainstream direction, like Megadeth for example, and others leaning more towards a death metal sound. There was also a lot of progressive thrash metal albums released during this time period. And even though thrash was dying, 1992 was still an interesting year, with at least a handful of great thrash metal albums being released. So if you're a fan of this genre, then make sure to smash that like button, and make sure that you guys are subscribed as well, because we're going to do 1993 next. And as always, we're only going to include full-length thrash metal albums, so no demos, live albums, EPs and such. So, let's do this then, and here is my top 10 thrash metal albums of 1992. In 10th place we have Assorted Heap and their second studio album Mind Waves. And this was a German band that released two albums, one in 91 and Mind Waves in 92. So, let's spin the track Mind Waves from the album with the same name.
Try to deliver for the control all the wrongs and pain, fighting with the best leader of future times, hate and love and what it does, and at the world to our plans and earth.
In 9th place we have Deathrow's last studio album Life Beyond. And even though I hold this album as one of the weakest, if not the weakest, it's still good enough to make it into the 92 list. So let's listen to the title track of Life Beyond.
Say goodbye, dear friends. Say goodbye to all you love. This life street, you can't go back. This way, this happens day by day. Say goodbye and die. Back to the day I'm nothing special. Say you jump into mind, but I see what really happens. Use your time, use your brain. Out on the streets, you lay on the ground. Point to the thing at you. The better to live, ability lost. Nobody cares. What's up to you? Say goodbye.
In 8th place we have Tourniquet with Pathogenic, Ocular, Dissonance. And Tourniquet was a Christian thrash metal band, and they were quite technical, and they had an awesome drummer in Ted Kirkpatrick. And this was their third studio album, and the first time that they entered the top 10. So let's listen to Pathogenic, Ocular, Dissonance.
Easy
In 7th place we have Death Thrasher's Solstice, and this album leaned more towards death than thrash perhaps, but I think it was good enough to make it onto my list, even if it's not for the weak-hearted. So here is Transmogrified by Miami Death Thrasher's Solstice. In 6th place we have Bay Area Thrashers Defiance and their album Beyond Recognition. And despite being from the Bay Area and releasing high quality thrash records, this band wasn't as popular as some of their neighbors. But now we're going to listen to Dead Silence by Defiance. In 5th place we have Swedish Thrashers Fallen Angel and their only full-length album Faith Fails. And they also released an EP in 1990, and some of those songs ended up on this full-length debut as well. And these guys reminded me a bit of Testament, so let's spin Premier Parish by Fallen Angel. In 4th place we have Testament with the album The Ritual. And I know that some people think of this album as their sellout album because of softer songs like Return to Serenity and The Ritual. But I think that songs like Sermon, Agony and Electric Crown stands out as solid thrashers. So let's listen to Electric Crown by Testament. In third place we have Sadus with A Vision of Misery. And this is the first time that they end up in my top 10 list, even if their previous two records are on par with this one, or perhaps even slightly better. Still, this is a very solid album. So let's spin the track, Through the Eyes of Greed by Sadus. In second place we have German thrasher Sodom with Tapping the Vein. And this album can be seen as a return to their roots, because this album borders to death metal. And in my opinion, this is perhaps not their best record, but it's not that far behind their classic albums from the 80s. So here is Body Parts by Sodom.
Nothing is impossible. Wonders of technology, even plastic surgery. Art and training is of use on the Bible. The abuse needs some lungs and needs some heart. Searching for new body parts. Body parts.
And the best thrash metal album of 92 is in my opinion Demolition Hammer, with their second studio album Epidemic of Violence. And this album is extremely intense and heavy. And their debut album was of a similar style and quality, but I think that Epidemic of Violence stands out as their best record. And they released another album in 94, but it was more of a groove metal album. So let's listen to the best thrash metal album of 92, which is Epidemic of Violence by Demolition Hammer. And here is my full top 10 list. And even though some people claim that thrash metal was dead by 92, I still think that this list shows that there were still a few great thrash metal albums being released in 92 as well, especially for the fans of the more extreme types of thrash. And now it's time to check out the albums that you guys voted for in my Discord server. So here is that list. The top 3 for me is the same for you, but in a different order. But then you guys chose Exhorder, The Law, which is in my opinion more of a groove metal album than a thrash record. It's definitely groovier than their debut album Slaughter in the Vatican. And these guys sound pretty much like Pantera on this record, in my opinion at least. And you guys also chose black thrasher Sabbat and their album Evoke, which is cool, but it's far from a pure thrash record as well. You guys also chose Exodus Force of Habit, which is in my opinion the weakest album of the classic era. They were definitely flirting more with the mainstream with this record. And the same can be said about Megadeth's Countdown to Extinction. I really like this record, but there aren't really any thrash metal songs on it. It was definitely a huge change in direction from the Rust in Peace days. And in the 10th spot you guys chose Kreator's Renewal, which is not really a thrash metal record either. It was on this album that Kreator started to experiment with industrial metal, and this album was a huge disappointment for me, and I still dislike it to this day. But we can clearly see that a lot of bands that waved the flag of thrash during the 80s are now starting to look for a new sound to fit in with the changing times. And it's really unflattering in most cases, but at least Sadus, Sodom and Demolition kept it real this year. And we also have a lot of honorable mentions, like Tankard's Stone Cold Sober or Mekong Delta's Kaleidoscope. And Depressive Age also got several votes this year without making it into the top 10. And let me know your favorite thrash metal albums from this year down in the comments. And what are your opinions on these lists? Let me know down below. And if you enjoyed this video, then crush that like button and make sure that you're subbed up, because 93 is coming up next. And if you want to support my work, you can either become a Patreon and get your name in the video, like these gentlemen, or you could buy a Ruthless metal shirt in the Ruthless store. It's all linked down below. And I've also transferred all my top 10 lists to Spotify, so if you want to listen to these tracks, I left a link to my Spotify page down below as well. Or you could just search for Ruthless Metal on Spotify and you should be able to find me. And don't forget to join my Discord server as well, so that you guys can vote on the best thrash metal album of 93. And that's it folks, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye bye.
Dramatic death, such a good analysis.